When citizens of the United States think of Civil War, images of the Union and Confederacy battling each other usually come to mind. The North and South of the country locked in armed conflict over slavery, economic struggles, and the moral core of the country. It's seen as one of the United States' deadliest conflicts, and one whose echoes still reach us today in all aspects of society. But what if I told you that this wasn't America's first Civil War? That a conflict hit the country in the 1600s, leading to a violent clash against the First Nations people. And it's usually known as King Philip's War, a conflict where white American settlers pushing too hard for territory and other concessions were met with intense military backlash. And that's the story I'll be telling today. Before we dive in, if you like historical content like this, please consider subscribing to the Historical History channel. We release weekly documentaries and daily shorts. With that shameless plug out of the way, let's discuss King Philip's War. In the winter of 1675, New England learned how quickly a familiar world could become unknowable. For 2 generations, English towns had multiplied across river valleys and peninsulas, mapping fields where Wampanoag corn once ripened and Narragansett canoes slid through reeds. Peace, or something like it, had endured. It was a peace of treaties and trade, of seasonal visits and shared dangers, of missionary sermons and legal summons, always stretched taut, always contingent. Massasoit, the Wampanoag leader whose diplomacy steadied the 1620s, had made coexistence possible. He could not make it permanent. Over the years, epidemics thinned native communities. English births and new arrivals swelled colonial rosters. Cattle grazed where deer had moved. When disputes rose, English courts adjudicated in English ways, with English assumptions about evidence, oath, and punishment. The result was not merely cultural friction. It was a transfer of power carried in parchment and backed by force. Metacom, Massasoit's son, faced that world as sachem. The English called him Philip, a name that made sense to them and obscured the networks that defined his authority. Kin ties to sachems and sound squaws, alliances renewed at councils and with wampum, obligations to protect the vulnerable and secure the next harvest. By the 1660s, he was negotiating from within a vice. Colonists accused him of plotting, demanded disarmament, insisted on accepting informants' whispers as proof. They fined him, sued him, and obliged land deeds that pushed Wampanoag homelands into smaller geometries. Then came John Sassamon, Christian, bilingual, a man who moved between. He warned Plymouth that Metacom intended war. His body was found under winter ice. The trial that followed, English judges, English procedure, English gallows, was heard across the region not as simple justice, but as a declaration. English courts would claim jurisdiction over native defendants for a crime committed among native people. When the 3 condemned men swung, sovereignty swung with them. In June 1675, fighting began near Swansea. Raids struck like lightning, here a bridge, there a barn, a garrison tested, a patrol erased and found only by crows. Colonists called out their militia. Drums rattled down village roads, but the formations they drilled on greens failed under beech and cedar, where lines broke and the enemy melted into cattails. At Brookfield, Settlers crammed into a single stronghouse, the town blazing around them as attackers fired from behind walls and stones. Relief arrived the next day, barely. Elsewhere, Nipmuc war leader Matomp maneuvered with precision, striking and stepping away, denying the militia the symmetrical battle they wanted. Through the summer and fall, the war widened. It crossed from argument to ecology. Fields burned before harvest, livestock slaughtered, winter stores turned to ash. Colonists spoke of savagery in their pulpits. Native leaders spoke of survival around their council fires. Meanwhile, the United Colonies, Plymouth, Massachusetts Bay, Connecticut, pressed the Narragansett for assurances. The Narragansett sheltered refugees. Neutrality in such a war looked like defiance. December drew a hard skin over the swamps. Colonial forces, resolved to break the stalemate, marched into Narragansett country. The fort they found, more winter village than fortress, rose on an island of frozen bog. The assault that followed is remembered as the Great Swamp Fight. Smoke roiled over snow. Fires spread from wigwam to wigwam. The dead lay mixed, warriors and the very young and very old, because that is how war pays its debts. Survivors staggered into the trees with little food, their kin scattered in the white silence. The winter of 1675 to 76 bit without mercy. Colonial authorities herded Christian Indians, men who had fought for them and women who had done nothing but live, in fear and suspicion onto Deer Island. The island offered neither shelter nor easy food. Exposure did what muskets did not. In the interior, native coalitions moved from encampment to encampment, rationing powder, watching the sky for signs of a thaw that would open paths, or a freeze that would bear a canoe. In February, Lancaster fell. Mary Rowlandson was taken. Her months in captivity, later retold with scriptures stitching the pages together, captured not only her suffering, but also glimpses of exchange. A piece of meat offered, a child bargained for, a sachem deciding mercy or menace with each hour's news. Her narrative taught colonists to see providence in survival and enemy in the neighbors they had once traded with. It also preserved, despite itself, the humanity and logistics of the other side, the shortages, the negotiations, the distances carried on sore feet. By spring, the colonies adapted. Benjamin Church learned to fight a different war: small units, native scouts, fast marches. Mohegan and Pequot allies, historic rivals to some in Metacom's sphere, guided raids and negotiations. Intelligence replaced bravado. A war that had opened with shock now turned on pursuit and attrition. In April, the Narragansett sachem Canonchet was captured and executed. Leaders like him were not easily replaced. Their deaths unstrung the bonds that held villages together in common cause. Crops could not be planted in ash. Powder could not be conjured by will. Raids still cut deep, but the coalition frayed into hungry bands. In August 1676, near Montauk, the chase ended. A native scout fighting with the English, named in most accounts as John Alderman, shot Metacom. Colonial reports linger on the grim display that followed. The message was aimed at the living. For southern New England, the war had broken. In the north, conflict burned on along the Kennebec and Penobscot, woven into French-English rivalry until 1677 to 78. But the hinge had turned. After victory, account books opened. Colonies were deep in debt. Petitions for relief climbed toward London. In the next decade, imperial hands would tighten, revoked charters, new governors, the dominion of New England, proof that even winners could lose autonomy. For native peoples, the reckoning took different forms: trials that ended at the gallows, sales that ended on Caribbean docks, returns to homelands under strict terms, or migrations into other native polities where kin and new names offered cover. What caused it? Not fate. Structures. Land hunger encoded in deeds, jurisdiction asserted through trials, a missionary project that blurred care with control, trade that made debt into dispossession. The Sassamon case did not cause King Philip's War alone, but it revealed its hinge. Whose law ruled on whose land? And yet, endurance. Wampanoag, Narragansett, Nipmuc, Massachusetts peoples did not vanish. They reassembled, sometimes publicly in churches that let them gather, sometimes quietly in households that taught names to children born under other roofs. They preserved place names, Montauk, Assawampset, that make the map itself an archive. They stand today to tell their own histories, challenging print narratives that once pretended to be the only memory worth keeping. When we remember King Philip's War, we should resist tidy morals. The war was not inevitable. Different choices, mutual jurisdiction, real consent in land sales, restraint in the uses of law, might have delayed it, softened it, perhaps transformed it. But the empire's gravity pulled hard, and the colonies leaned into it. The result was 2 years of flame and famine, whose shadow still reaches across New England hills. For scale, by a share of population, King Philip's War was deadlier for New England than the American Civil War was for the United States. Historians commonly estimate that about 5% of English colonists in New England died between 1675 and 1676, while indigenous losses in southern New England were far higher, often approximated at 40% when you include deaths from battle, famine, disease, flight, execution, and enslavement. By contrast, roughly 2% of the U.S. population died in the Civil War. The absolute numbers are smaller in the 1670s. It's the proportion, and who bore it, that makes this war so devastating. Colonial governments stagger under debt. The war fuels arguments for tighter imperial control from London. In the following decade, charters will be revoked and the Dominion of New England imposed, a political hangover from a military victory that felt uncomfortably close to defeat. History's work is not to excuse or condemn by reflex, but to understand how people came to the choices they made, and to name those choices so we might choose differently when new courts claim new jurisdictions, when new debts pull at old homelands, when power writes a law that serves itself and calls the result peace. And that's the story of King Philip's War. Again, a deadlier conflict than the American Civil War when you consider the population at the time and the destruction the conflict caused. It's also just another reminder of how foreign governments really did invade, alter, and destroy a way of life for so many. Is it inevitability that drives us towards these conflicts? Could things have gone a different way? Let me know your opinion in the comments below. While you're at it, like the video and subscribe for more content. Not only do you get the benefit of my awesomeness hitting your eyeballs every week, it really helps boost the channel for others to see these videos as well. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next week.